with the and the more you appreciate the amount of guidance in this book, and the more you realize how much Muslims are basically then losing and missing by not leveraging this book to any reasonable extent. The vast majority of Muslims, their relationship with the Quran is shallow, superficial, poor, neglect. And this is because of a number of reasons. We talked about them before, is people, the way they understand their religion did not leave any incentive or motivation for them to learn Quran. Because if you understand the Quran, if you understand Islam as a simple short list of do's and don'ts, a few tasks to do and few things to avoid, you don't need to be studying the Quran. And if you are under the impression that you know everything you need to know about your religion and you are doing everything you need to be doing, then there is no more incentive to study the Quran. And then, of course, the idea that Quran is not for average people, only scholars can understand it, that's added to the mix. So we ended up with people think there is no need, no incentive, and they are not capable, and they are not able they think they're not able to understand it. So therefore we ended up in this situation where the best you can hope for is that for someone to be reciting Quran every now and then, occasionally listening maybe to Quran when they're driving or something, and all of this is good, but that will not do it. It's what is needed is the study of the Quran for guidance, and has largely disappeared, unfortunately. And we're trying to revive it, and we should. Each one of us has the responsibility to try to revive it in their respective environment. Revive this idea of studying the Quran and fixing this messy situation that it's not true. First of all, Islam is not what we were told. It's a big commitment. It's a big mission that you embrace, and you need all the guidance and support and empowerment and inspiration you can get from the Quran and from the prayers to be able to fulfill that mission. And there are so many temptations in life, and you need that spiritual awakening, and that you get also from the Quran. When you read the Quran, you will get reminded. You will be reminded about things that you tend to forget. There are parts of your spirituality and your faith will be strengthened, part of your character and manners. It's like prayers is meant to take you to a different world, take you out of this life and start. Same thing, the Quran is meant to do that. It's meant basically to lift you against gravity, or to take you to different world, to much bigger universe, and clarifying your vision and your thinking, and cleansing your heart and strengthening your spirituality. Basically, what food and shower do for our body, Quran and prayers, they do for our spirituality. They feed and cleanse, and Last time we believe we stopped at verse 5 of Surah Ma'idah. Ma'idah is Surah 5. So chapter 5, verse 5. That's the last thing we talked about. We concluded with this rule of allowing food and marriage between Muslims and the people of the book, and that the purpose of this is the integration. Quran did everything possible to integrate the people of the book in the community. And then, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة. So after talking about what is permissible, things that are lawful and halal, everything that is good, and the general rule أحل لكم الطيبات. Anything that is good and wholesome is lawful. After talking about what is permissible in food, now it's coming to things that are also wholesome for spirituality. So moved from permissible to talk about the prayers. Now prayers, إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة فاغسلوا وجوهكم وأيديكم إلى المرافق وامسحوا برؤوسكم وأرجلكم إلى الكعبين وإن كنتم جنوبا فاطهروا وإن كنتم مرضى أو على سفر أو جاء أحد منكم من الغائط أو لامستم النساء فلم تجدوا ماء فتيمموا صعيدا طيبا فامسحوا بوجوهكم وأيديكم منه ما يريد الله ليجعل عليكم من حرج ولكن يريد ليطهركم وليتم نعمته عليكم لعلكم تشكرون. And the verse talked about the rules, getting ready for prayers. Prayer was mentioned several places in Quran, and talking about how to pray in all conditions, including in the battlefield, including when traveling. All of this tells you the importance of prayer, critical importance of prayer, because when there are rules that tells you how to pray in all conditions, which means there is no excuse to neglect prayer or to pray late or after the time, that tells you how important it is. You who believe, when you are about to pray, wash your faces and your hands up to the elbows, wipe your heads, wash your feet up to the ankles, and if required, wash your whole body. If any of you is sick or in a journey or has relieved himself or had intimate contact with a woman and can find no water, then take some clean sand and wipe your face and hands with it. You can see how symbolic, just getting ready to pray because you're meeting Allah. And we know when we have an important meeting, how we prepare for it, whether it is work-related or even social relationship. Any person whom we respect, any meeting that we value, and we prepare for it. Allah does not wish to place any burden on you. He only wishes to cleanse you and perfect his blessing on you, so that you may be thankful. That's the purpose. So again, we see this in fasting also. ما يريد الله ليجعل عليكم من حرج. So it's not, these rules are not meant to make your life hard. They're exactly the opposite. They're meant to make your life more pleasant and more, because Allah, who created us and knows what is best for us and loves the best for us, is telling us that these things are good for you and they are not a burden, even though they appear to be an extra task that you do or burden. But if you compare the benefits that you get from this, then you will realize that that these are not a burden, they're actually in your best interest. For fasting now, it is well established that fasting does so much to the body. I mean, to the point that now doctors are prescribing it. Doctors are telling people to fast because it can cure or fix so many problems in the body. Now, getting ready for prayers is important because you cannot just go and you're meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the wudu, in addition to the physical benefits of it, but the preparation that you are about to do something important, so you prepare for it. That's the most important thing about wudu, yani the evolution, the preparations for meeting Allah. Of course, when it comes to the evolution of wudu, prayers, fasting, hajj, etc., there is hardly anything in Islam where there isn't more than one opinion. So anybody who tried to make this religion rigid and only one way and only one opinion, they're totally wrong, and they're not doing this religion a favor. They're coming to something that is flexible so that it can make people's life easier, so that it can adapt to any context. And you make it so rigid that it becomes hard on people, and then it will not be relevant or applicable in different contexts. There is hardly anything. Rules of prayers, rules of fasting, rules of wudu, rules of hajj, rules of almost everything. You find more than one opinion, and that shows the flexibility of this religion, and the fact that nobody should really take their understanding of the deen, the religion, and make it that's the religion. That remains always your understanding of it. So there is no spokesperson. There is nobody who will say, this is Islam. You always have to add, this is my understanding of Islam. That's my interpretation of the verse, but nobody should claim exclusive right of understanding or interpretation. ولكن يريد ليطهركم وليتم نعمته عليكم. He only wishes to cleanse you and perfect his blessings on you so that you may be thankful. واذكروا نعمة الله, so that you may be thankful. لعلكم, I really want all of us to pay attention to this statement. Whenever in Quran you come across something that says لعلكم تشكرون, so that that's a goal. That's a goal of religion. That's something that we have to pay attention to. So whether it's like sometimes guidance comes in the form of instructions, sometimes it comes in the form of incentive, encouragement to do something. Sometimes it comes in the form of deterring you from doing something, and sometimes it comes in this format. So that you are thankful, so that you may be thankful. لعلكم تشكرون. So being grateful to Allah is a goal. واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم وميثاقه الذي واثقكم به قلتم سمعنا وأطعنا واتقوا الله إن الله عليم بذات الصدور. And so remember Allah's blessing on you and the pledge with which you were bound when you said, we hear and we obey. Be mindful of Allah. Allah has full knowledge of the secrets of the heart. Again, this is what you need to do. Now, why you need to do it? Because you made the pledge, you made the commitment, and because this is a way to express your gratitude. So لعلكم تشكرون, the prayers is your expression of your love and your gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then, because immediately after that comes, so remember God's blessing on you and the pledge with which you were bound when you said so. The prayer is an expression of your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your love, your gratitude. Your love of Allah reach a level that you express it through worship. And then gratitude. You are so grateful to Allah, you want to express that, and then you find prayers as the mechanism or the way to do that. Now, why you do that? You are invited to do this. One, so that you are thankful. You may be thankful. And two, that's how you honor your commitment. You are people who made a pledge. And in this surah, this chapter, this idea of mithaq was repeated, was mentioned, emphasized. There is a covenant. So do the following so that you may be thankful. That's your, and then, so this is the way to honor your covenant with Allah. واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم وميثاقه الذي واثقكم به. And then Allah knows what's in the hearts, because this prayer is not a mechanical task. It is meant to cleanse the heart, and it has, I mean, it's another incentive or motivation for us to do these things and to do them right, because Allah knows what's in the hearts. Now, people can be satisfied with you or can be impressed with you praying, but Allah looks at your heart, how much concentration was achieved in that prayer. And then, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على أن لا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. So it's the same style or pattern of things that you are invited to do, and then you are reminded with taqwa, and you're reminded with the reasons why you should be doing it. You who believe, be steadfast in your devotion to Allah and bear witness impartially. Do not let hatred of others lead you away from justice, but adhere to justice, for that is closer to the awareness of God or to the taqwa. Be mindful of God. God is well aware of all that you do. This is probably to reflect a little bit on this. Now, this is related to the previous verse, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, verse number 1. No, number 2. It's the same chapter, verse number 2. So a couple of verses ago, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ قَوْمٍ أَنْ صَدُّوكُمْ عَنِ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ أَنْ تَعْتَدُوا. Do not let your hatred for the people who barred you from the sacred mosque induce you to abuse or to transgress or to break the law, etc. So that's a level, we already said this is very high. There are people who harmed you before, people who humiliated you before, because Muslims were going from Medina to Mecca, and the people of Mecca prevented them, blocked them from doing that. And this is a Hajj that nobody should be blocked. This is something that does not belong to those people. This is something that is universal. So, and was very painful for Muslims. Yet they were told that this is not an excuse or a reason for you not to be fair with those people. So that's a very high level. It's a very high level that somebody who did this to you, and yet you have to be fair with them. And that's why Quran said you need to support each other to do this. وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى. But now he's taking them to a higher level. That was very high already. That level was high. Now the Quran is taking us to even higher level, which is not only to refrain from transgressing against those people, but to have to be fair with them. على ألا تعدل على ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى. So there is level to be fair with everybody. There is a higher level that someone has harmed you and you still restrain yourself from abusing or transgressing or crossing your limits. Now there is even a higher level, which is even with these people, not only you restrain yourself, but also you have to be fair with them, which is ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا, and then linking this to taqwa. اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. يعني, so this is closer to taqwa, to piety, and then it's reminding us that Allah knows, is well aware of all that we do. So this is the logic position of a community that was assigned the task to lead and to guide and to establish justice. They have to be taken to that level. It's not enough to be at the average level of the first one, which is just to be fair with people. But we're talking about restraining yourself from any injustice against someone who committed injustice against you. I mean, so that's self-restraint. And now we're talking about actively, if you are to deal with those people, still you have to be fair. So it's not only restraining yourself, but also you have to be fair, and linking that to piety and saying that Allah, and reminding you that Allah knows everything you do. So you have to be really careful and not to try to play around or work around the rules, this particular rule. And then, of course, because it is difficult to do, so there are a lot of incentives. This is closer to taqwa, to piety. Allah knows everything you do. Allah promises, and then Allah promises those who believe and do good, forgiveness and great reward. But if any of you is, no. Allah has promised forgiveness and a rich reward to those who have faith and do good works. Those who reject, so those who have faith, and of course this can be general, but also it can apply to this context. So it's pushing you to observe very high level of fairness and justice. And then because Allah knows this is tough, so gave you that package of incentive, remind you this is the closest to piety, and then Allah knows everything you do, and Allah promised forgiveness and rich reward for those who have faith and do good deeds, which in this context means those who, I mean, it can be general, and it can also apply to in this context, to those who observe this high level of fairness. And at the same time, of course, usually they come hand in hand. And those who reject faith and deny our revelations will inhabit the blazing fire. So it's a very high level, very demanding. So we had this full package of incentives and reminding us that linking this to the one of the highest thing that you can think of, which is taqwa or piety, and then reminding us that Allah knows everything we do, and then also the forgiveness and rich reward for those who respond, and those who reject faith and deny our revelation will inhabit the blazing fire. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اذكروا نعمة الله عليكم again. So اذكروا نعمة الله عليكم. Remember God's blessing on you. اذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ هم قوم أن يبسطوا إليكم أيديهم فكف أيديهم عنكم واتقوا الله وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنون. You who believe, remember God's blessing on you. Raise their hands against you, and He restrained them. Be mindful of God. Let the believers put their trust in Him. This is about one. Some scholars say it was about one particular incident, but it can be applied in general. That a lot of time Allah will protect us from things that were coming our way. And of course, the tools that we have in our hands to deflect things that were bad things that were coming our way are one, supplication, dua, and two is tawakkul. واتقوا الله وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنون. The closer you come to Allah, the more Allah, the closer you get to Allah, you get closer and closer until Allah loves you. When Allah loves you, you got it made. لا يزال عبدي يتقرب إلي بالنوافل حتى أحبه, until I love him. And so, and when Allah is on your side, then you can expect these things to happen. You can expect Him to guide you to the best decision and best choices and to protect you from things that were coming your way. Wattaqullah. So I mean, how many times this taqwa was mentioned in those verses? We have هو أقرب للتقوى واتقوا الله. That's just the previous verse, and now واتقوا الله وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنون. This tawakkul, putting trust in Allah, this is something that is really so powerful. Very few people are aware of it. Very few people do it right, because the balance is very delicate. It's easier to fall in one of the extremes. On one extreme, you basically forget about it and you rely on yourself, on your calculations and on your plans, and you forget about this resources, great resource that is available, which is Allah's help and support. On the other hand, it's what many Muslims do, unfortunately, which is to be complacent. You don't do your part. You don't do diligent job, and you rely that Allah will take care of things. And the delicate balance is basically you do everything you can as if you are relying completely on yourself. And then when you do that, you switch. You rely completely on Allah as if you had no plans or you had nothing. So it's, and the best example you can think of is the migration of the Prophet from Mecca to Medina. That's the best example of tawakkul. Someone wants to understand this idea of tawakkul, study the migration of the Prophet from Mecca to Medina. He planned it to the least details, did not leave anything planned everything, planned all the details. They hired the best guide who knows the desert. They prepared those camels. They went in opposite direction. Rather than going to Medina, they went in opposite direction. They planned to stay in a cave for 3 days until the dust settled. They planned for people to bring them the news of what is being planned, what the people of Mecca are planning, what they're doing. They planned somebody to come and erase the footsteps or footprints, the footprints of the people who come, and nothing was left to chance. Very detailed plan. Yet, after all of this, and while they were in the cave, people of Mecca, they were able to reach that cave and to be around it. So Abu Bakr as-Siddiq said, if they look down, they're going to see us. We're gone. And here, the Prophet made that switch. So planning, he forgot about the fact that he's a prophet when he was planning as if he was relying completely on his plans. Now, in the cave, there is nothing they can do. Now you exhausted all the means, you did everything you can do, you did it right, you planned carefully. Now the Prophet switched to the other side, to the other mode, which is ما بالك باثنين الله ثالثهما إذ يقول لصاحبه لا تحزن إن الله معنا. Don't worry, Allah is with us. What do you think is going to happen to two people? Allah is their third. So that tells you the formula. That's how you apply it. You're planning something, you plan it to the least details, as if you are relying completely on your plans. After you exhaust all the means, you put your trust in the hands of Allah to take care of things that you were not able to do. Not leaving even small piece of things that you can do, to take care of things. وَأُخْرَى لَن تَقْدِرُ عَلَيْهَا قَدْ أَحَاطَ اللَّهُ بِهَا. Then we have extensive, the surah talks about story of Bani Israel and the story of Adam. And that happened repeatedly in the Quran. Because if you want to think of the whole history of humanity, you can think of these milestones. Adam and his story in creation, etc. And then Bani Israel, the children of Israel who were assigned this mission for centuries with all the prophets, etc. And then the last prophet. And so these are the turning points. And Quran, a lot of time, Quran mentioned the story of Adam and Bani Israel back to back, or one after the other. And in this surah, we see the same trend. So from verse 12, وَلَقَدْ أَخَذَ اللَّهُ مِيثَاقَ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ, goes all the way to verse 26. That's Bani Israel. And then وَاتْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ نَبَأَ ابْنَيْ آدَمَ بِالْحَقِّ, verse 27 to 31. That's Adam and the children of Adam, children of Israel, children of Adam, and then going back to Bani Israel. verse 32, etc. So now, why this emphasis? I mean, about 1/3 of the Quran is the stories of the prophets and the stories of the nation before us. And in that third, the focus is more on the story of Bani Israel. Why this? Because this is the nation that was given the task, the same task before. And it is very important for you to learn the lessons and at least not to repeat the same mistakes. And of course, the story of Adam is full of lessons because all the struggle between good and evil, all the struggle that you see within yourself, in the society, in the world, etc., had its roots there. I mean, these are the people who Satan managed to recruit and to use on one side, and those who answered the call of their creator. So, and here you see the word mithaq, covenant. وَلَقَدْ أَخَذَ اللَّهُ مِيثَاقَ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ وَبَعَثْنَا مِنْهُمْ 12 نقيبا. What is this mithaq? وَقَالَ اللَّهُ إِنِّي مَعَكُمْ لئن أقمتم الصلاة وآتيتم الزكاة وآمنتم برسلي وعزرتموهم وأقرضتم الله قرضا حسنا لأكفرن عنكم سيئاتكم ولأدخلنكم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار. That's the first part of the deal. The second part, فمن كفر بعد ذلك منكم فقد ضل سواء السبيل. God took a pledge from the children of Israel. We appointed 12 leaders among you. And God said, I'm with you if you keep up the prayer, pay the prescribed alms, believe in my messengers and support them, and lend God a good loan. I will wipe out your sins and admit you into gardens graced with the flowing streams. After this pledge or covenant, any of you who ignore it will be far from the right path. So there is nobody should take anything for granted. There is no chosen people. There is no whether Muslims or not anybody. Nobody should take anything for granted. This is a covenant. You sign it. You honor it. You violated. You pay the consequences or the price. فَمَنْ كَفَرَ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ مِنْكُمْ فَقَدْ ضَلَّ سَوَاءَ السَّبِيلِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have any privileged nation or privileged race or privileged anything. There is a covenant. You honor it. Allah will wipe out your sins and admit you to gardens. You violated, then you are far from the straight path. That's the covenant. And now he's telling us what happened. فبما نقضهم ميثاقهم لعناهم وجعلنا قلوبهم قاسية يحرفون الكلمة عن مواضعه ونسوا حظا مما ذكروا به ولا تزال تطلع على خائنة منهم إلا قليلا منهم فاعف عنهم واصفح إن الله يحب المحسنين. Now what happened? But they broke their pledge. So we distanced them from us and hardened their hearts. They distorted the meaning of revealed words and have forgotten some of what they were told to remember. You, Prophet, will always find treachery in all but a few of them. Overlook this and pardon them. God loves those who do good. So this is what happened between them and Allah. And they did not honor that. Again, the word covenant and pledge was mentioned repeatedly in this chapter, in the surah. So they break the covenant? They did not they broke their pledge, distanced them from us and hardened their hearts, etc. ومن الذين قالوا إن نصارى أخذنا ميثاقهم فنسوا حظا مما ذكروا به فأغرينا بينهم العداوة والبغضاء إلى يوم القيامة وسوف ينبئهم الله بما كانوا يصنعون. Now, this is mentioned what happened, and after that, it will extend the call to everybody, to the people of the book in particular, of what they are supposed to do. We also took a pledge from those who say we are Christians, but they too forgot some of what they were told to remember. So we stirred up enmity and hatred among them until the day of resurrection, when God will tell them what they have done. So in 2 verses, Quran is in 3 verses. Quran is telling us about the covenant and about the result or the outcome from the children of Israel, and then from the 2 segments, the people, because all of them are Bani Israel, because even Isa, Jesus, was sent to the children of Israel. Quran tells us وَرَسُولًا إِلَى بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ. So it is the work of the disciples of Jesus that made the religion universal and spread all over the world. But originally it was also a religion for the children of Israel. So this is what happened. Of course, the message here, that's the text, but the message is for believers, for Muslims to avoid that outcome. And now addressing the people of the book, يا أهل الكتاب قد جاءكم رسولنا يبين لكم كثيرا مما كنتم تخفون من الكتاب ويعفو عن كثير قد جاءكم من الله نور وكتاب مبين يهدي به الله من اتبع رضوانه سبل السلام ويخرجهم من الظلمات إلى النور بإذنه ويهديهم إلى صراط مستقيم. Beautiful, very eloquent verses. People of the book, our messenger has come to make clear to you much of what you have kept hidden of the scripture, and to overlook much you have done. A light has now come to you from God, and the scripture making things clear, with which God guides those who follow what pleases him to the ways of peace, bringing them from darkness into light, darkness out into light by his will, and guiding them to a straight path. It's an amazing couple of verses here, 2 verses. يا أهل الكتاب قد جاءكم رسولنا يبين لكم كثيرا. So very kind invitation to the people of the book to remind of the thing that Quran keep emphasizing, that this is our messenger, like the previous one, and he came with a message that confirms your original message, and this is the light, guidance, with which Allah guides those who are pursuing his good pleasure. يهدي به الله من اتبع رضوانه. This is something that they discussed extensively in Friday, not just this Friday, that the fact that this Quran guides those who are pursuing the good pleasure of Allah. I mean, you made the covenant or a pledge to seek and pursue the good pleasure of Allah, whatever it takes. And then that's what the companions did. And then you're looking for guidance. You want to honor that commitment. You want to honor that pledge. So you want to know the expectations. You want to know the directions. And that's what Quran provides. Quran was revealed to give you directions and to tell you what is expected from you. And guide them where? So guide this kind of people. Guide them where? Guide them to the ways of peace. Subul as-salam. Because everybody who properly understands this religion knows that peace is an overarching goal of Islam. The peace and security of people is an overarching goal that this religion came to make, to establish peace inside you, with yourself, people with one another, humanity with nature. It's peace all over. يهدي به الله من اتبع رضوانه سبل السلام. And everything that was said or done in the name of Islam to project it as a religion of violence, or as people who are imposing their religions on others, or people who are troublemakers. I mean, when they go to places, they create troubles, or they make that place insecure, or all of this has not only has nothing to do with the teachings of Islam, it runs against it. All of this behavior runs against the teachings, because this is a religion that has the Prophet mentioned in the Hadith. He says that حتى يسير الراكب من صنعاء إلى حضرموت لا يخشى إلا الله والذئب على غنمه. That I would be pursuing my message and my mission until basically complete peace prevails in the Arabian Peninsula, to the point that the person, and in one version it was a woman, who can cross the desert, the Arabian Peninsula at that time, fearing nobody and fearing nothing except Allah. And that at that time it was really something like science fiction, because the Arabian Peninsula was full of thugs and tribes fighting each other all the time. And so for the Prophet to say that I will be pursuing my message and my mission until peace, complete peace and security prevail in the Arabian Peninsula, and Quran tells us that even when it instructed Muslims to be strong, وَأَعِدُّ لَهُمْ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Yes, Quran instructs Muslims to be strong and to have power. Why? Not to attack people, to deter people from attacking them. تُرْهِبُونَ بِهِ عَدُوَّ اللَّهِ وَعَدُوَّهُ. يعني and this is what is being practiced by all countries in the world. Why they keep making weapons and buying them and purchasing them, not to attack people, not to attack others, but to deter others from attacking them. And the same verse in Surah At-Tawbah goes and says, وَإِن جَنَحُوا لِلسَّلْمِ فَاجْنَحْ لَهَا. That prepare, be strong so that you deter people from attacking you, but whoever opts for peace, go for it. And in جَنَحُوا لِلسَّلْمِ فَاجْنَحْ لَهَا. We'll stop here, inshallah, and we'll take some questions if there are questions, and we'll continue next week, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, Doctor.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Hopefully everybody is doing good today. I do have a couple of questions regarding to like things that you talked about today, and mostly what you talked about last time, which is more like you talked about hadith and how we should select parts of hadith. And I'm going to take it like to try to relate what you said with just the last example that you mentioned. We're talking about like protecting ourselves or people attacking us. And it seemed to me like historically, there is so many histories, even during the Sahaba and during the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that there was futuhat that people went out of where they live. If we talking about like uh, lots of like leaders, and where I'm going with this is like through the history there is some leaders who were like 14 years old and 16 years old who led the war, and that doesn't mean, or who led the futuhat, let's say. It's like, is there a difference between the word futuhat, the way you view it, or and the war, and what they were doing in the different places outside of Medina and Mecca, for example? So this is part one of the question, and part two is like you're saying about like we should follow clearly the Quran, but we still it's like, I know that this is not what you mean, but it sounded last time that you mentioned something about like we should be selective of what, I don't know if this is what you meant, but be selective of what we use of the Sunnah. And this is not the first time you mentioned this, but in the Quran itself, it's like, and there is lots of teachings about like وَمَا أَتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ. It's like how I would understand that, and I differentiate between those two. And can I say one more thing, and I will stop? And the third thing is about the relationship of Muslims with other religions. It seems to me like, and this is my third part, and I will stop here. It seems to me like, yes, we need to have relationships with others, but it seems lately, and maybe in the last 100 years, we've been more than followers than trying to teach others of what we're doing. We're hear a lot more about people automatically coming into Islam just from hearing about it or researching about it. But I don't see like any religious Islamic groups or Arab Muslim countries are spreading that word of God, because we're not a good example in those countries. I'm going to stop here. I would appreciate if you have some feedback about this.
Three big questions. Let's start with the first one. I mean, when it comes to history, we have to differentiate between the time where the Prophet was still alive and receiving revelations. That's one era. And then there is everything else. And that everything else, we may divide it into the time of the Khulafa Rashidin, or the just rulers who ruled after the Prophet for a couple decades. And then the rest. So why I'm saying this? Because the death of the Prophet, the end of revelation. Anything that happened 1 hour, 1 minute after the death of the Prophet, we cannot tell whether it was correct or not, because there was no Quran, there was no revelation to sanction it or to endorse it. Yes, these are the people who are the closest to the Prophet. These are very pious people, etc. But still, if we want to distinguish whether anything done by Abu Bakr as-Siddiq is not a religion, it's an ijtihad. Ijtihad means it's an opinion. Yes, these people know the essence of religion because they were so close to the Prophet and they lived with him, etc. But it is still, there is big difference between something done by the Prophet while Quran is still revealed, and something done 1 hour after the death of the Prophet when Quran is no longer revealed. And there are some decisions that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq took. For example, there was some difference among the companions. In one of them, there was some difference between him and Umar, the closest two individuals to the Prophet. So why? Because that's not religion anymore. That's ijtihad. So we have to make that distinction very clearly. Of course, after that, I mean, once we start the era of dynasty, that has nothing to do. I mean, you can never use that as examples or as models to follow, or the very dynasty rule has nothing to do with Islam. The very fact that you have one person or family who have absolute power, no transparency, no accountability, and then when they die, when a person dies, his son takes over, that has nothing to do with Islam. That has no roots and runs against the principles of Islam, of people be led by consent, leader is accountable. It runs against the principles of Islam. So I'm going to drop that era altogether. Now, even at the time even at the time of Rasul, even the time of Rasul, not everything that the Prophet has done is legislative, meaning that he was doing it because it is religion. No, the Prophet was the leader of a community. So some decisions are good in that context. Actually, almost every decision as a leader, every decision that the Prophet has taken was good in that context. So the Prophet, that's why the companions understood this very well. When he speaks to them, he will tell, are you speaking in your capacity as a messenger or in your capacity as a leader? Because if you're speaking in your capacity as a messenger, we're just gonna follow, because we don't receive revelation, you do. We don't receive revelation, so we're gonna follow you. But if you are talking to us in your capacity as a leader, now we have a different opinion. So that double capacity, or two roles, dual role that the Prophet had, it's very important that we understand it. Of course, after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, the first role was gone completely. So Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was behaving essentially as a leader of the community who is trying his best to understand and implement the purpose of Allah. So doing his utmost to have the best understanding and the best implementation of Islam. So when he made some decisions, he made them not necessarily because many of his decisions were made as the political leader and for the well-being of the state and for the well-being of the community. I mean, fighting those who refuse to pay zakat or taxes. The companions told Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, this decision is religiously wrong. And some of them that used the hadith of the Prophet. And yet he insisted on it. And if you think about it, politically, that's the right thing to do. I mean, you cannot, even nowadays, I mean, just let a city or county or state refuse to pay taxes. There is no such thing. That can allow to disintegrate the state. So we have to distinguish, even first of all, between the time of the Prophet and afterwards. That should be clear distinction. But even during the time of the Prophet, the companions understood that he has dual role. In one hand, tells them, for example, this is how you need to fulfill pilgrimage. This is how you need to pray. That's something that they just take. They don't discuss. But Quraysh is coming to attack us from Mecca. Should we go out? Should we wait for them and have a street fight in that's an opinion, that's a decision, and it was debated and they ended up with a decision. Unfortunately, all of this is not being emphasized, and we lost the essence of this religion, and we get stuck in some appearances. So at the time of the Prophet, and it's not me saying this, it is mainstream scholars nowadays say there is no jihad, there is no such thing as going out to attack somebody. And they're saying that the Prophet never done that. By the way, the books of the Sirah, the biography of the Prophet, they are not very authentic. I mean, all books of Sirah are relying mainly on Sirah of Ibn Ishaq and Ibn Hisham. And both of these, they have some stories that are not authentic, and sometimes some discrepancy. Does this happen second year or the 6th year or the 5th year? So it's not, so all based on all of this, and then that will take us to the second part, which is the Sunnah. Based on all of this, I'm very comfortable with the opinion that there is no such thing as Muslims go and attack somebody else. That's even then, by the way. Now, this happened, yes, it did happen, but it happened when? It happened at a time when there was no borders, no international law, no international treaties, no nation state, and there were empires who are expanding all the time. That's where this Muslim state was established. I mean, there were empires, Romans, Persians, and this newly emerged state. And everybody, if you're not expanding, somebody else is expanding at your expense. It's not, we are now talking at a very different context. So the context is very important. Prophet never attacked. By the way, the Prophet, all the time he spent related to battles, some scholars say day and a half, some put it to a couple days out of the 23 years. And you read book of the biography of the Prophet and you find it as if this is a military general army who spent all his life fighting it, which is not true. Now talking about the Sunnah and Hadith, and I didn't say selective. I'm saying scrutinize, not selective. We have to distinguish clearly between the Quran and anything else. So that distinction has to be clear. Idea of taking some books of Hadith closer and closer to Quran to the point that people start comparing, and it's a widespread statement that the Bukhari is the second most authentic book after that's not right. This is Quran authentic, and the Prophet himself discouraged people from documenting Sunnah, Hadith. And that's more than likely because he did not want it to be confused with the Quran. But Umar al-Khattab also discouraged people from documenting Hadith. But he said it why? He said that I'm afraid or concerned that you start focusing on the Hadith or the Sunnah and you forget the Quran or the expanse of the Quran. So when the Hadith was done the 2nd and 3rd centuries. 2nd and 3rd, these are facts. This is, nobody can argue about them. There are facts, and then we can talk about interpretation. The Hadith was documented the 2nd and 3rd centuries. It was documented with very primitive tools. No laptops, no internet, very primitive tools. It was documented under oppressive regimes. With all of this, we have people who did an extraordinary job outstanding job of scrutinizing the hadith. So what they did, they worked on about 600,000 hadith, 600,000 saying of the Prophet, claimed saying. They applied their tools and they come up with those couple thousands. Is this work can be 100%? Never. It's impossible that this work can be 100%. Given all these circumstances, this work can never be 100%, which means that everything that the Prophet said was in Bukhari, and something that is not in Bukhari means the Prophet did not say it. Nobody can say that. There is no human work that is 100%. I mean, if you go to the lab and you do physical, scientific experiment, there is always some margin of error. There is no such thing as 100%. So, is it a great work? Yes. It helped preserving, yes. Islam, yes. Some people, they have this misconception. They say that if it was not for Bukhari and for Muslim, etc., we would not even know how to pray. That's not true. Muslims were praying for 200 years, 200 to 300 years before Bukhari was born. So it is not like without these books, we could not have understood. No, there are things that went from one generation to another. The tawatur means mass of people from mass of people. So bottom line, we have to value tremendously the books, especially the ones that called Sahih or the authentic. But we should not make them sacred books. And we should be ready that if we find a hadith, first of all, if the Quran itself, you cannot take a verse from the Quran and apply it anywhere, anytime. Quran itself has some foundational verses and have some contextual verses that are applicable only in a certain context. So you cannot open the Quran randomly and say, I take this verse, I can apply it in the United States. And somebody else say, I can do it in Mexico. No, you cannot. You have to take into consideration the context. There are foundational verses in Islam. These are principles in Quran. That's for the Quran. Never mind for the hadith. Because for the Quran, at least we know about that these verses are authentic. We just have to make sure whether they are foundational or contextual. For the hadith, we are not sure this is authentic. So we have to keep that option also. That if we, first of all, we need to get from the books of the hadith that are relevant. Like, for example, if I'm to produce a book of hadith for Muslims in America, or for American Muslims, and then I'm to produce a book of hadith for people in Africa or Asia or somewhere else, I will come up with two different books. Why? Because some hadith are relevant here, they're not relevant there. And some hadith are relevant there, and they're not relevant here. Of course, there will be some hadith in common. There will be intersection between the two, but there will be some hadith saying of the Prophet that will be included in a book of hadith that is good for Muslims in America or American Muslims, and you don't see those hadith somewhere else, and vice versa. All right. So we have to do that. First of all, focus on the hadith that are relevant. And then if it is relevant and it contradicts a solid principle of Islam, at least we have to put question mark on it. At least we have to put question mark on it. I mean, I have a principle in Islam that was repeated in Quran, repeated in several places, that there is no compulsion in religion, that you don't judge people, that it's not your job to convert people, etc. And then here some hadith comes and say that I was instructed to fight people until they say La ilaha illallah. It's very, very hard for me to accept it. The problem is not with the people who worked on the hadith. They did a great job. The problem happened with the followers. The problem is I'm a student of Bukhari. I'm operating on the premise that any hadith in Bukhari is authentic. Regardless, I have to find a way to reconcile it with the Quran. I don't have to do that. There are some hadith in Bukhari or in Muslim, they portray the Prophet in not in a good way, and they should not be kept. The problem happened with the followers of these scholars when they made those books sacred and decided they operated on the premise of any hadith in those books is authentic, and we have to find a justification for it. We have to find an interpretation for it. We have to reconcile it with a verse, even if they are contradictory. You didn't have to do that. And that will take nothing away from the book, from the great work of Bukhari and Muslim, etc. And we have also to forget about this idea that Islam is so fragile. We are afraid that if we take a hadith out, the whole Islam is going to collapse. We have really to forget about this. Islam is so solid, so strong, that it's not the way we think. It's not the way that if we take one rule or one hadith, or we do ijtihad, or we make adjustment, etc., our religion will collapse and will no, it will not. So that's probably, I hope that addresses the questions that you raised.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Good. All right, if there are no more questions, then we can.
Jazakallah.
Wa
Suhail.
Ayakum salam.
So inshallah we'll see everyone next week.
Assalamu alaikum.